Jeff Sessions, before the November midterm elections. But after that, the president would not commit. That from a new interview this afternoon he gave to Bloomberg, filled with other news nuggets, including that the entire Mueller special counsel investigation is, quote, illegal. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Peter Dossier tells us the president's been working over Sessions supporters in the Senate. We'll tell you what that means. But we start with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts with the news headlines from this latest interview from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. As has been known to happen from time to time here at the White House, some late-breaking headlines from the president in that interview with Bloomberg. First of all, about the Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg, who was granted immunity to testify to prosecutors from the Southern District of New York. President Trump told Bloomberg that he believes that Weisselberg did not betray him when he was speaking to prosecutors, saying that the time period that he was talking about in regard to the Cohen investigation was only for a limited period of time. The president adding that Weisselberg is, quote, a wonderful guy. You mentioned this, that the president also said his attorney general's job, Jeff Sessions' job, is safe until after the midterm elections. Asked what might happen after the midterm elections, the president did not comment. The president also said that he would consider pulling the United States out of the World Trade Organization if it didn't shape up. He said that a deal with Canada on NAFTA is close and reiterated that a deal from the European Union on cars is not enough to satisfy him. Fox News had reported that earlier in the day. Also earlier in the day, the president took to Twitter to explain further why Don McGahn, his White House counsel, is leaving the White House, and in doing so provoked more questions as to exactly why it is happening. The departure of White House counsel Don McGahn was widely expected, though President Trump spent a lot of time explaining it on Twitter today. In one tweet, the president shot down the notion McGahn was fired. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner had nothing to do with the so-called pushing out of Don McGahn, the president tweeted. But soon after, he seemed to indicate maybe McGahn was pushed out, tweeting, "The rigged Russia witch hunt did not come into play even a little bit with respect to my decision on Don McGahn." Whether it was the president's decision or McGahn's to soon depart the White House, he was praised again today by senior White House staff.
He did a fantastic job as White House counsel, and the president made that clear yesterday.
And the president couldn't resist one more shot at reports earlier this year that Don McGahn talked him out of firing special counsel Robert Mueller and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The president tweeting, "I like Don, but he was not responsible for me not firing Bob Mueller or Jeff Sessions." So much fake reporting and fake news. As the president was putting a coda on McGahn's pending departure, talk was swirling at the White House that President Trump is prepared to hit China with more tariffs as early as next week. Multiple sources telling Fox News it is not yet a done deal, but some $200 billion in Chinese goods could be hit with tariffs of 10 to 25% after the public comment period ends next Wednesday. In a tweet yesterday, the president scolded China for putting tremendous pressure on North Korea because of the U.S.-China trade dispute, a tweet China didn't take kindly to.
The U.S. is first in the world when it comes to twisting the truth and irresponsible and absurd logic.
At the same time, President Trump praised his relationship with Kim Jong-un as a very good and warm one, and contradicting what his defense secretary said just the day before, adding, "There is no reason at this time to be spending large amounts of money on joint U.S.-South Korea war games." But U.S. officials tell Fox News while they have seen some confidence-building measures from North Korea, they have not seen any significant moves by Kim Jong-un to dismantle his nuclear program. The explosions at North Korea's nuclear test site and dismantling of a rocket engine test bed are said to be mostly for show. Officials believe the test site tunnels could easily be reopened, and the engine facility was for liquid-fueled rockets, which North Korea is leaving behind. North Korea has got a long way to go to even begin to satisfy the terms of the agreement that Kim Jong-un signed with President Trump earlier this year in Singapore. And there's a growing concern among many officials here in the United States that Kim Jong-un has no intention of living up to that deal. Brett?
More on all this with the panel. John Roberts on the North Lawn. John, thanks. In the minds of many of the president's supporters, the idea of firing Attorney General Jeff Sessions is not a matter of if, but when. But as we just told you, the president said today any change will not happen until after the midterm elections, if it happens at all. Then Senator Jeff Sessions was the first senator to endorse candidate Donald Trump. But now the relationship between these two men is strained to a breaking point. Correspondent Peter Dossier has a look.
The Attorney General isn't under siege for something he's doing. He's under siege for something he's not doing, overseeing the Russia probe.
Jeff Sessions recused himself, which he shouldn't have done.
According to the president's congressional confidants, there's more beneath the surface.
It's much deeper than that.
What else? What are we missing?
Well, we won't say on this show, but it's a pretty deep breach.
Now, formerly friendly Republican allies are piling on.
He's been the most ineffective Attorney General we've probably ever had in the history of this nation.
But a former Sessions staffer says the AG deserves credit for righting the ship at the DOJ.
And I think you really have to go back to what the Department of Justice was like when the Attorney General took over. Under the Obama Justice Department, they were focused on going after corporations, going after law enforcement, and reducing prison populations.
The Justice Department provided Fox a 24-page pamphlet of accomplishments during the Sessions era. Among the headlines, dismantling MS-13 and violent transnational gangs, settled with groups improperly targeted by the IRS, ending taxpayer-funded grants to sanctuary jurisdictions. Not on the list, investigations the president wants into alleged wrongdoing by Clinton-linked entities. The president has urged action, taunting Sessions by tweeting, "Come on, Jeff, you can do it. The country is waiting." And the president suggests that under Sessions, the Department of Justice isn't living up to its name.
I always put justice now with quotes.
Despite the steady criticism, insiders believe it's unlikely Sessions would ever quit.
He's committed to implementing the president's agenda, and I would be surprised if he thought that he was done with that task.
So Sessions defenders insist he's doing more to advance the president's agenda than anyone else. But that agenda did not include a huge DOJ investigation into Russian election interference back in 2016 when Sessions became the first senator to endorse Trump. And his decision not to fold it into his portfolio now is a problem for the president. Brett.
Peter Dossier live on the Hill. Peter, thanks. Well, President Trump is ripping CNN again and also taking some new shots at the folks at NBC. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, has a fair and balanced look with specifics.
I saw a piece on NBC today. NBC, not just CNN. CNN's the worst.
President Trump escalated his attacks on two networks today by condemning CNN President Jeff Zucker and NBC News Chairman Andy Lack, taking the unprecedented step of declaring both executives should be fired. The backdrop is CNN standing by a report that former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen believes the president had advanced knowledge of the 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer. Although Cohen's lawyer Lanny Davis, who tells Fox News he spoke to CNN off the record but did not confirm the allegation, calls the story false. The president accused CNN of hatred and extreme bias and denounced Zucker, a one-time friend when both worked at NBC, by addressing CNN's new parent company. Little Jeff Z has done a terrible job. His ratings suck, and AT&T should fire him to save credibility. CNN hit back. Make no mistake, Mr. President, CNN does not lie. We report the news, and we report when people in power tell lies. CNN stands by our reporting and our reporters. One of those reporters on the story, Jim Sciutto, a former Obama administration official. Another is Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame, who has accused Trump of a malignant presidency.
What we are watching in the Trump presidency is worse than Watergate.
Bernstein said no taunt would diminish his lifelong mission of bringing the truth to light. The president mocked NBC's Lack in suggesting, based only on rumors, the good news is that Andy Lackey is about to be fired, for incompetence and much worse. He said NBC was hurt badly when anchor Lester Holt got caught fudging my tape, in which Trump tied James Comey's dismissal to the Russia probe.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it.
But there is no credible allegation of improper editing by NBC, which posted the full tape online. The president also took a shot at fake books about him that are pure fiction. Perhaps he was anticipating next month's book by Bernstein's one-time colleague Bob Woodward, which is called Fear. Brett?
Howie, thanks. The body of the late Senator John McCain is on its way right now at this hour to Washington, D.C. Today, Arizonans said goodbye to McCain, lining the streets of Phoenix as his funeral procession made its way from the state capitol to a local church for an emotional ceremony. National correspondent William Lajeunesse brings us inside.
While thousands lined the streets of Phoenix waving American flags and campaign signs, hundreds more packed the North Phoenix Baptist Church as Arizona paid its final tribute to adopted son John McCain. Amazing grace. It was a ceremony filled with song and scripture.
To everything there is a season.
And a star-studded affair, including professional athletes, more than 24 current and former senators from both sides of the aisle, all picked by the late senator himself.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democrat. And I love John McCain.
Former Vice President and longtime Senate buddy Joe Biden explained how the two became and stayed friends.
Above all, we understood the same thing. All politics is personal. It's all about trust. And I trusted John with my life, and I would. And I think he would trust me with his.
Former Chief of Staff and friend Grant Woods explained how McCain was able to relate to people from all walks of life in the Grand Canyon State.
They saw in John McCain the embodiment of values they hoped to see for their country. He loved the people, our diversity.
Diversity that included having Tony Espinoza, a Latino advocate and Democrat, work on his campaign.
He understood all of us, whether it was white, black, brown, Asian. To him, it didn't make any difference. What he knew is that we all make America great.
McCain also had a passion for Arizona sports. Cardinals star Larry Fitzgerald explained his admiration.
Your devotion to the people of Arizona, our nation, and your convictions won our admiration. Your love set an example for all of us to follow.
Examples that will live on.
I think John's legacy is going to continue to inspire and challenge generations of leaders as they step forward. And John McCain's impact on America is not over. It's not hyperbole. It is not over. I don't think it's even close.
I did it my way.
Well, John McCain had a real love affair with Arizona, and of course the feeling was mutual, but today the two parted ways. As you said, Brett, his plane is scheduled to land in about 1 hour at Joint Base Andrews. He'll lie in state tomorrow at the U.S. Capitol, followed by services at the National Cathedral, before being laid to rest on Sunday at the Naval Academy. Back to you.
William, thank you. I'll join Martha next hour for that arrival. President Trump has told Congress he is canceling a pay raise that most civilian federal employees were due to receive in January. The president informed House and Senate leaders about that in a letter today. He says the pay increases would cost $25 billion on top of a 2.1% across-the-board increase for most civilian government employees. Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner says that move has nothing to do with finances and is what he calls part of the president's war on federal workers. Stocks were down today. The Dow lost 138. The S&P 500 fell 13. The Nasdaq dropped 21. There was good economic news today for the Trump administration. Consumer spending increased solidly in July. This follows word yesterday that the second quarter GDP, as we reported, did better than previously believed. So what is the state of the U.S. economy? Tonight, correspondent Doug McKelway looks at some of the numbers and how critics are responding.
There are three kinds of lies. Lies, damned lies, and statistics, said Mark Twain. It rings true as the two parties spin the latest economic statistics 2 months out from the midterm elections. GDP growing at a revised 4.2% in the second quarter. Unemployment down to 3.9% in July. Productivity rising at 2.9% for the second quarter. All evidence, National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow says that we are crushing it.
We're beating the estimates. We're moving into a 3% zone. We may maybe moving into a 4% zone.
Capital spending in the first half of this year was up 10%. Can you imagine up something? When's the last time you heard of anything being up 10%?
Democrats counter the Obama administration teed the economy up for Trump. They also note middle-class wages remain flat.
For too long, we've relied on GDP alone as a bellwether for how Americans are faring in the economy, when we should be looking as well at income data across the economic spectrum.
Speaking to the Chicago Tribune editorial board, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi dismissed the robust growth as, quote, 4 and 4 and all the rest of that. As for historically low unemployment for Latinos and blacks, the paper noted, quote, she didn't go there. The new Fed chief this week indicated that growth is sustained, quote, the economy is strong, inflation is near our 2% objective, and most people who want a job are finding one. This former director of the Congressional Budget Office agrees.
The very, very sharp decline in the regulatory burden under this administration, followed subsequently by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in December 2017, are all permanent changes that one can expect to fuel economic growth.
There is broad agreement among economists that all the rosy predictions are out the window should a full-fledged trade war erupt. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Up next, we are less than a week away from the confirmation hearing for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. We'll introduce you again to Judge Brett Kavanaugh. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles says a California man is arrested after allegedly threatening to kill staff members at the Boston Globe, following the newspaper's recent editorial calling for publications nationwide to take a stand against President Trump's attacks on the media. The U.S. Attorney's Office says 68-year-old Robert Chain is charged with making threatening communications in interstate commerce. Fox 28 in Columbus says Ohio State University says 145 people have provided firsthand accounts of sexual misconduct by a former sports team doctor. Richard Strauss is accused of groping scores of male athletes and other students during his 2 decades at the school. Strauss killed himself in 2005. And this is a live look at Boston from our affiliate, WFXT. One of the big stories there tonight, the Justice Department sides with Asian American students suing Harvard University over its consideration of race in its admissions policy. The DOJ says the school has failed to demonstrate that it does not discriminate on the basis of race. Harvard says it does not discriminate and will fight to defend its right to use race as a factor in admissions. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. The confirmation hearing for the president's Supreme Court nominee is set for this Tuesday coming up. So far, reaction to Brett Kavanaugh has come down firmly along party lines in the U.S. Senate. Tonight, my colleague and anchor of Fox News at Night, Shannon Bream, looks at how the judge's work history could lead to some tough questions next week.
I, Brett M. Kavanaugh, do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear.
Brett Kavanaugh's status as a D.C. power player first gained national attention in 2006, with a Rose Garden swearing in to become a federal judge, surrounded by the 2 men who helped put his professional career on the fast track.
I chose Brett because of the force of his mind.
And giving the oath, the man he would now replace, Justice Anthony Kennedy, for whom Kavanaugh served as a clerk in 1993. The new job came after 2 years of contentious delay tactics by Senate Democrats.
This nomination appears to be judicial payment for political services rendered.
Sources said at the time, opposition from the left was fueled by concerns Kavanaugh could one day sit on the Supreme Court.
The White House experience made me a far better judge than I otherwise would have been. In terms of understanding of government,
Brett Michael Kavanaugh brings a stellar resume. Yale Law School, private attorney, and a top deputy to Special Prosecutor Ken Starr's probe of Bill Clinton that led to the president's impeachment. On the bench, the 53-year-old has been a reliable conservative on his court, voting to rein in dozens of administrative decisions from the Obama White House. But conservatives are at odds whether a 2015 ruling on Obamacare signaled his implicit support of the law.
Sometimes a Republican might see that outcome and disagree with it. Sometimes a Democrat might see that outcome and disagree with it. The point of that is Judge Kavanaugh does not care. It's a nonpartisan principle.
And debate, too, whether Kavanaugh would limit access to abortion, since he's never directly confronted the issue as a judge and hasn't said publicly whether he'd overturn Roe v. Wade. But just months ago, he dissented in the appeals court decision that allowed a pregnant teenager in the U.S. illegally to get an abortion. In a dozen years on the job and 300-some opinions to his credit, Judge Kavanaugh sees his job calling constitutional balls and strikes.
To be a good umpire and a good judge. Don't be a jerk.
And in the small world category, President Trump's two high court nominees share a lot in common. Kavanaugh and Justice Neil Gorsuch went to high school together outside Washington. Check it out. They clerked at the same time for Justice Kennedy. Both joined the federal bench the same year and both helped co-write a book on judicial precedent. So, Brett, it boils down to don't be a jerk, apparently.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
We'll see you at 11.
See you then.
Well, up next, harsh words and name-calling between New York's governor and the activist actress who wants to replace him. First, beyond our borders tonight, the UN envoy for Syria is proposing civilians evacuate the rebel-held region of Idlib into government-held areas. He's warning that nearly 3 million people in that region could face the consequences of a major military escalation. A Dutch lawmaker has canceled plans for a Prophet Muhammad cartoon contest after thousands of hardline Islamists marched toward Pakistan's capital today. Physical depictions of the Prophet are forbidden in Islam and deeply offensive to Muslims. A huge chunk of the wooden roof of a 16th century church built over an ancient Roman prison has collapsed in Rome's Forum. No one was injured at the San Giuseppe de Falegname church. It was closed at the time. Firefighters were called to the scene and brought in sniffer dogs to make sure no one was injured there. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. They may be both Democrats, but New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and activist actress Cynthia Nixon are definitely not on the same team. Their one and only debate ahead of next month's primary was full of animosity and name-calling. Correspondent David Lee Miller shows us.
Coming to you. The debate was fraught with disagreement even before it got underway. One controversy was room temperature. Governor Cuomo wanted it colder than his opponent, Cynthia Nixon. When it began, things heated up and fast.
Can you stop interrupting?
Can you stop lying?
Yeah. As soon as you do.
Nixon, although trailing in the polls, is buoyed by recent Democratic primary upsets. Come from behind winners such as New York congressional candidate and self-declared socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum have fueled uncertainty around the race. Cuomo spent much of his time attacking President Trump, a strategy to win support from the left.
Today, you have to fight Donald Trump, who is the main risk to the state of New York. He is trying to change the rights and values of New Yorkers, and the first line of defense is New York, and the governor leads that fight.
Nixon accused Cuomo of leading a corrupt and ineffective administration. She also tried to position herself as more anti-Trump.
We need to oppose Donald Trump not just with rhetoric but with policy. So why, for example, have you not expanded access to driver's licenses to undocumented New Yorkers?
A Democratic strategist who has worked for and against Cuomo says a primary upset is possible, but not likely.
Andrew Cuomo, by running as the anti-Trump, by moving to the left on issues that the left cares about, is frankly trying to occupy the very turf that Cynthia Nixon would need to win.
In another effort to win over voters, Governor Cuomo said if reelected, he would serve a full 4-year term and not run for president. The only caveat, he added, is if God strikes me dead. Brett?
David Lee, thank you. The United Nations Atomic Watchdog Agency says Iran continues to comply with the nuclear deal reached with major powers even after the withdrawal of the U.S. The Associated Press reports the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran has stayed within key limitations set in the agreement. President Trump pulled the U.S. out of that deal in May. A move here in the U.S. for new sanctions against China is, as you can imagine, not going over too well in Beijing. Correspondent Benjamin Hall has the story tonight.
China is pushing back after a group of U.S. lawmakers urged the U.S. government to impose sanctions on Chinese officials for human rights abuses against Chinese Muslims. Senator Marco Rubio and Representative Chris Smith made the call in a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. It was signed by 15 other senators and congressmen. The letter said that Uyghur Muslims in China's far western region of Xinjiang were being subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, and restrictions on religious practice. But China has hit back, saying these were wild allegations, a waste of U.S. taxpayer money, and that there was more discrimination in the U.S. than in China.
I advise them not to make wild allegations or threaten to impose sanctions at every turn on other countries. They should certainly serve the American people properly instead of poking the nose in other countries' affairs and pretending to be a human rights judge.
Media reports suggest that between 500,000 and 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been sent to detention centres for months of political indoctrination. And the UN has also asked for China to release information.
We're asking China on the number of people, we're asking China on the detention condition, on the human conditions, on the basis for the detention, about the legality of the detention, about the access to lawyers.
China, though, claims it's cracking down on terrorists. Some Uyghur splinter groups have carried out a number of terror attacks across China over more than a decade, killing hundreds. And the US State Department has labelled some as terrorist groups. The call for sanctions comes as tensions between the US and China continue to grow, not only over North Korea, but also over the escalating trade war. Brett?
Benjamin Hall in London. Benjamin, thank you. President Trump launches another attack on the media. This time it's CNN and NBC, plus a lot of news from a new interview in the Oval Office. We'll get reaction from the panel when we come back.
You hit it. I'll use his words rather than mine, that McGahn was a strong witness for the president. The president encouraged him to testify, is happy that he did, is quite secure that there is nothing in the testimony that will hurt the president.
Don McGahn's a really good guy, been with me for a long time, privately before this.
Any concern about what he said to the Muellers?
No, not at all.
Well, White House counsel Don McGahn leaving. The president tweeting out this morning, I'm very excited about the person who will be taking the place of Don McGahn as the White House counsel. I liked Don, but he was not responsible for me not firing Bob Mueller or Jeff Sessions. So much fake reporting and fake news. Well, about Attorney General Sessions, in an interview late today in the Oval Office with Bloomberg, the president said this. President Donald Trump said Attorney General Jeff Sessions' job is safe, at least until the midterm elections in November. Quote, I just would love to have him do a great job, Trump said Thursday. Asked if he'd keep Sessions beyond November, he declined to comment. Other headlines out of that interview, he said very close to a deal with Canada, may pull the U.S. out of the World Trade Organization. We've heard that before. He said it today. Considering a capital gains tax break by issuing a regulation that would index gains to inflation. Said he doesn't regret appointing Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chairman, even after he criticized him, and said Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, did not betray him when he agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in their investigation into Michael Cohen. He knows that because he talked to Weisselberg. There you go. Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host, and Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and president. Byron, out of all of that, what did you take as most important?
Well, on Jeff Sessions, maybe it's time for him to resign just to create a little mischief. There's been a real change on the Sessions story because of a change in the Senate that we've seen. Up until now, Sessions' old Republican colleagues in the Senate, especially on the Judiciary Committee, have basically told the president, if you fire the Attorney General, a new one will have to be confirmed by us, and we just don't have time, so don't do it. But this week we saw Lindsey Graham, member of the Judiciary Committee, saying, look, this is a dysfunctional relationship between the president and the Attorney General, and it really needs to change. So I think that basically Trump has a green light to do this after the midterms.
To that point, Leslie, Politico has a story out today saying that the president, personally lobbying these senators to flip on Sessions. If Sessions' recusal was his original sin, President Trump has come to resent him for other reasons, griping to aides and lawmakers that the Attorney General doesn't have the Ivy League pedigree the president prefers, that he can't stand his Southern accent, and that Sessions isn't a capable defender of the president on television, in part because he, quote, talks like he has marbles in his mouth, the president has told aides. That's Politico reporting that.
I would believe that. I mean, it seems like, the president's pretty, finicky and fickle when it comes to individuals. Sadly, the president forgets, speaking about Lindsey Graham said that if, Sessions should leave, and then what are we going to have? We're going to have somebody that's loyal to the president, but it's going to protect Mueller. I don't think that the president understands that the loyalty for the attorney general is to the Constitution and not to him. He doesn't grasp this. And whoever were to take the place after November, because I think Sessions certainly will be gone, it's clear after what the president said in this interview that the individual I don't think anybody's going to be happy with unless they are leaning toward politics as opposed to the law and the Constitution, and that is the role of the Attorney General.
Understood. That is the role, but if you look back at past Attorney Generals, there has been a lean towards the president's wishes, for example, Eric Holder and others.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong. I really do. I mean, I think, as symbolic as it is, there is a reason why Lady Justice is blinded. There is a reason the scales are supposed to be balanced, because if you truly are doing that job the way it is meant to be done, the way the framers of our Constitution, our government had it in the originally and now, you are supposed to be dedicated to the Constitution and not the president. And even Jeff Sessions is saying that. That's where his loyalty is supposed to lie.
Tom.
Yeah, look, I think Jeff Sessions, there's a deep rift, as Lindsey Graham said, between it's become personal. Trump vents about him constantly on Twitter. Doesn't think he's doing what he needs to be doing in terms of the investigation. And it all started with the recusal. He thought he shouldn't have done it, and really left him exposed. So I think Sessions, his days are numbered. I think Trump is smart to not do it before the election. That would cause a whole basket of issues and bad news coverage and all the rest. But I think his days are numbered, certainly after November.
Another target is Bruce Orr, who is still at the Justice Department. The tweet number 9 here on Nellie Orr, his wife. Wow, Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr's wife, is a Russia expert, fluent in Russia. She worked for Fusion GPS, where she was paid a lot. Collusion. Bruce was a boss at the Department of Justice and is unbelievably still there. Here is Representative Jim Jordan on this.
Bruce Orr, senior official at the Justice Department's wife, was working for the firm hired by the Clintons to put together the dossier. And we know the dossier was the key to all of this. And Bruce Orr, Peter Strzok told us in the hearing 5 weeks ago, Martha, Bruce Orr is the guy who funneled parts of the dossier to the FBI. When they went to the court, the FBI knew 3 important things, and they didn't disclose this to the court. They knew the Orr's involvement in production of the dossier. They knew that Christopher Steele had this extreme bias against the president, and they knew who paid for the dossier.
Byron, where's this going?
Well, the president's really deep in the weeds of this investigation. One of the things we learned when Bruce Orr testified behind closed doors, we learned that knowledge of the dossier went farther than we thought in the Justice Department and in the FBI, because Bruce Orr told various people about it, and we also know that Bruce Orr still has a job, and clearly the president is extremely frustrated by that.
Just to shorthand it, I mean, the allegation here is that Bruce Orr was the funnel by which the dossier gets to the FBI through his wife at Fusion GPS. And that's the shorthand.
Yeah, but this is not the only reason that we have an investigation. If nothing else, one thing the dossier did get correct was that Russia meddled, and probably still is and will unfortunately be meddling unless we do something about it, in our elections. And that is one of the 3 prongs, if you will, that Mueller is tasked with investigating as the special counsel.
Tom? Look, you think how about this? Do you think that what do you think Mueller is thinking now? Does he put out some interim thing? Is he holding off past the midterms? Does this get to a conclusion or some indication of a conclusion before November 6th?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I mean, obviously, nobody knows what Bob Mueller's thinking except Bob Mueller. But we're now within that sort of range, 70 days and counting down to an election. If Mueller sort of hews to tradition and standard, he would not issue a report prior to the election.
Especially after what Comey did.
Correct. I don't think, look, I think Mueller, given the fact, because of all the controversy and conflict surrounding, he doesn't want to have any more further allegations that he's trying to manipulate or play politics with this investigation.
We shall see. All sides. Next up, the midterms and the rise of progressives.
I I'm not an Albany insider like Governor Cuomo, but I think that experience doesn't mean that much if you're not actually good at governing.
My opponent lives in the world of fiction. I live in the world of fact. Let's just do a few facts, okay? The subway system is owned by New York City. The subway
MTA has been controlled by the state since 1965.
Can you stop interrupting? Can you stop interrupting?
Can you stop lying?
Yeah, as soon as you do.
The back and forth there. New York Governor Cuomo, activist actress Cynthia Nixon, who's challenging him. She's still a long shot. Real Clear Politics has her way back in latest polls. But if you talk to New Yorkers and you talk to people who follow this race, they looked at that debate, Leslie, and said, man, it looks like the establishment's having a tough time, or at least it got a little bumpy there with a progressive challenger.
This is what kills me about my party as a Democrat. Have we learned nothing from 2016? One of the things that I blame Bernie Sanders supporters who did not come out and vote because they hated Hillary so much for Donald Trump being our president. And we're seeing a repeat, in a sense, with this. If we're going to have a blue wave, a blue tsunami, a blue whatever you want to call it, you don't challenge the seats that are solid. Cuomo has a solid chance to be governor again, and this is not where there should not be division within our party. We should be going to try and flip seats in districts that can be flipped to get control of the House and the Senate.
But Tom, it does sound like there's a little concern in a number of different races about this rise of progressivism.
Sure, absolutely. And I think you saw Cuomo's aggression last night shows that he is concerned, and he probably should be more concerned after last night, because I thought Cynthia Nixon got the better of him in some of those exchanges. You mentioned the polls. The last poll in this race was taken in July. So we've had a full month, and I'm eager to see what the numbers will be, especially post-debate. The election, the primary is on the 13th of September, so we got about 2 weeks left. But this could be a lot closer than people expect. I'm not saying she's going to win, but I think it might be a lot closer than people expect.
Clearly, that's where the energy in the Democratic Party is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's definitive.
Absolutely. But I'll stop lying as soon as you do. Oh, what a terrible line. But this is the Hillary-Bernie fight continuing with a different cast of characters, and it's been going on the whole time. And if all of us weren't so obsessed with Donald Trump every single day, this would be a huge ongoing story. It hasn't stopped.
By the way, there are a lot of those stories. The economy, North Korea. We try to cover them all here on Special Report. Tom, we're going to ask panelists all the way to the midterms what race they're following, at least the race they're following now. Your choice.
Florida Senate, which wasn't a race that Democrats were worried about initially, but Bill Nelson has really been struggling down there. Rick Scott's running ahead in the latest polls. And the interesting question is, what does last Tuesday's primary elections for governor, how does that affect this Senate race? Democrats think that Andrew Gillum is going to energize African Americans, minority voters. That's going to benefit Bill Nelson in the Senate race. Republicans think actually that DeSantis is going to energize Trump voters, much more so than Putnam would have. So it'll be interesting to see how that race plays out. But it is definitely a race to keep an eye on.
As you look at the balance of power in the House, we put this up all the time. Democrats need 23 seats to take control of the House. The going conventional wisdom is that they're going to get there. But, it's not a done deal as of yet. Your pick here.
49th District in my state where I live of California. I'm not a fan of Darrell Issa. I'm glad that he's going. And it's Mike Levin against Diane Harkey. Levin is the Democrat. This is an area that is one of the red pockets of the state of California, a very blue state. This includes La Jolla, part of San Diego. This has been a changing demographic. I think this is one seat that certainly could flip in favor of Democrats. But it'll be interesting because if that happens, we're going to see that happening in the OC and other areas in Sacramento and San Diego throughout the state of California.
Yeah, California is one of the risky places for Republicans this cycle, especially in the House. All right, Byron, wrap it up here.
North Dakota Senate. The Republicans have been handicapped by having such a tiny majority in the Senate, 51-49. If they're going to make it any bigger, North Dakota is probably their best chance to do it. The most important fact in the race between Heidi Heitkamp and Kevin Cramer is that Donald Trump won North Dakota by 36 points. And Heidi Heitkamp, a first-termer, Kevin Cramer, because North Dakota is so small in population, they both were elected statewide. So this is the one where Republicans really hope they can pick up a seat.
All right, panel, thank you very much. We'll be following all those races. When we come back, the late Senator McCain is right now on his way to the nation's capital.